When I first met Lila Moreno, she was just another waitress trying to make ends meet. The cafe wasn't fancy, a small place tucked between glass towers that reflected the city's greed more than its light. She moved quietly between tables, her smile soft but guarded, like someone who had learned that kindness sometimes comes at a cost. One rainy afternoon, Ethan Vale walked in, not as a man who owned half the skyline, but as a father who'd lost his way. His suit was immaculate, his watch worth more than Lila's entire yearly wage. Yet there was something deeply human in the way he held the small hand of a girl beside him. Her name was Amelia, no more than 6, with the same ocean gray eyes as her father. But those eyes looked tired, older somehow, like they carried a sadness too big for such a small heart. Lila noticed it immediately. She always noticed pain before it spoke. Ethan sat down at a corner booth, rain dripping from his coat. Lila approached, pen trembling slightly in her hand. "Coffee for you, sir, or something for your daughter?" she asked gently. Amelia whispered, "Hot chocolate, please." Ethan smiled faintly. "Make that too." It should have been just another customer interaction, just another rainy day. But when Lila turned to leave, Amelia tugged at her sleeve. "You smell like vanilla," the little girl said, "like Mommy used to." The words froze everyone for a second, the air thick, the silence louder than the rain. Ethan looked away quickly, his jaw tightening. Lila knelt down. "Vanilla's my favorite too," she said softly. "Your mom must have had wonderful taste." That night, after closing, Lila couldn't stop thinking about them. She didn't know why the man's sadness lingered in her chest. She'd seen loneliness before, in faces, in eyes, but this one felt familiar. Almost like she'd met him before, somewhere between a dream and memory. The next morning, Ethan returned. Same table, same little girl. He waited until the cafe emptied before he approached the counter. "Miss Moreno?" he said, his voice calm but heavy with something unspoken. "Could we talk privately?" Lila hesitated, glancing at her manager, who gave a discreet nod. They moved to a quiet corner near the window where rain still drizzled against the glass. "I know this will sound strange," he began, "but I need your help." Her brows knitted. "My help?" He took a deep breath. "Will you pretend to be my wife?" The words landed like a slow thunderclap. For a second, she thought he was joking, but his eyes, those steady, storm-colored eyes, told her he wasn't. "I beg your pardon?" He didn't flinch. "It's not what it sounds like. There's a family event this weekend. My parents are old-fashioned. They've been pressuring me to remarry since Amelia's mother passed away. They think I've moved on." He paused. "They want to meet her." Lila blinked. "And you want me to pretend to be her?" "I saw how Amelia smiled at you," he said quietly. "She hasn't done that in years." It was madness, utter madness. Lila's rent was overdue, her shoes had holes, and she'd never owned a dress that could pass for a billionaire's wife's wardrobe. But when she looked at Amelia, that fragile smile, that spark of hope, something in her heart refused to say no. So she said very softly, "All right, I'll do it." That night, as she stood before her mirror, Lila barely recognized herself. Ethan had sent over a dress, deep emerald, simple yet elegant. Her reflection looked like someone else entirely, someone who belonged to a different world. When the car arrived, sleek and black, she almost backed out. But then she remembered Amelia's little voice. "You smell like Mommy." She couldn't break that illusion, not yet. Ethan was waiting outside the mansion, a house so large it looked like it could swallow her childhood home whole. He looked different too, not the cold businessman she'd seen, but a man trying to fix something that had long been shattered. "You look beautiful," he said quietly. She smiled nervously. "You look like someone who does this too often," he chuckled faintly. "More often than I'd like." Inside, the mansion buzzed with quiet wealth chandeliers, marble, and faces that smiled with practiced politeness. His parents approached, all pearls and expectations. And when Ethan slipped his hand around Lila's waist, the world seemed to freeze. For the first time, she understood the gravity of what she'd agreed to, not just pretending, but stepping into a life she'd never dreamed possible. She smiled when introduced as Mrs. Vale, but inside, her heart whispered a warning she didn't yet understand. Because somewhere in the crowd, a pair of sharp eyes watched her. Every move, eyes that recognized her from a life she thought she'd left behind. The night moved like a scene from a movie Lila wasn't supposed to be in. The silverware sparkled, laughter floated between chandeliers, and every polite conversation carried a hint of scrutiny. She could feel the judgment, the whispers, the waitress pretending to be a wife. But Ethan never left her side. His hand stayed gently on her back, his voice calm and steady, as if her presence somehow steadied him too. When dinner began, his father raised a glass. "To new beginnings," he said warmly. "It's good to see you smiling again, son." Ethan's jaw tightened, but he lifted his glass. "To family." Lila followed, her hands trembling slightly. Amelia, sitting between them, leaned in and whispered, "You're doing great, Mommy." That word, Mommy. It cracked something open inside her. She'd never had children. She'd buried that dream years ago under the weight of bills and broken hearts. But tonight, for the first time, she felt what it might have been like. After dinner, when guests began to drift into the garden, Ethan led her away from the noise. The moon hung low, bathing the manicured lawns in silver. "You were perfect," he said quietly. "Thank you." Lila smiled, a little sad. "Perfect isn't really my specialty." He looked at her then, really looked. "You'd be surprised." For a moment, the silence between them felt alive, heavy with the kind of tension that only truth could break. But before she could speak, a voice called out from the shadows. "Lila Moreno?" She froze. The woman stepping forward wore a glittering dress and an expression that could slice glass. Ethan's mother. "I knew I'd seen you somewhere," she said coldly. "You worked at that cafe downtown, serving coffee." Ethan stepped in immediately. "Mother," but Lila shook her head. "She's right." The room inside had gone quiet, curious eyes now peering through the open doors. Lila took a deep breath, her heart pounding. "I was a waitress. I still am. I never meant to deceive anyone. I just didn't want to disappoint Amelia." The older woman's gaze softened just for a moment. "And yet, she's smiling again. That's something even we couldn't manage." Ethan looked between them, torn between apology and admiration. "I asked her to help me," he said finally. "None of this was her idea." Lila turned to him, her voice barely a whisper. "Why me, Ethan? You could have chosen anyone." He hesitated, his throat tightening. "Because Amelia's mother's last wish was that she'd remember what kindness feels like. And when you smiled at her that day, she did." The truth landed like a wave, gentle but unstoppable. Lila's eyes shimmered. "That's why you asked me." He nodded. "You reminded her of love, of warmth, of the world I've forgotten how to give her." Tears welled in her eyes, blurring the city lights beyond the glass. "Ethan." He stepped closer, his voice low. Maybe it wasn't just for Amelia. Silence again, the kind that speaks louder than words. From behind, little footsteps pattered across the marble. Amelia threw her arms around Lila's waist, looking up with sleepy eyes. "Can you stay with us tonight, Mommy?" Lila looked at Ethan. He didn't say a word, just nodded, the kind of nod that held both gratitude and something unspoken. And for the first time in a long while, Lila didn't feel like she was pretending. That night, as she tucked Amelia into bed, she realized she hadn't just stepped into someone else's life. She'd found a piece of her own she didn't know was missing. Outside, in the quiet glow of the city, Ethan watched from the doorway. The walls of his world, polished, cold, unbreakable, had begun to crack. And through the cracks, something fragile yet powerful began to grow. Not a contract, not a lie, but the beginning of something real.